Well, it was once considered a conspiracy theory.
Mysterious brain injuries.
Declassified CIA documents prove that, yes, the CIA actually has been, for decades, researching how vaccines could be used for mind control.
A previously unknown weapon.
Brutal directed energy weapon systems that are designed to incapacitate.
Wounded by a secret weapon.
Individual over a certain period of time will produce psychological and physical reactions.
I immediately felt fullness in my head.
A full body convulsion.
And just a piercing headache.
Like someone squeezing your head.
Absolutely life-altering.
The incidents became known as Havana Syndrome.
Havana Syndrome.
Directed energy attacks on U.S. soil.
It was happening not only to our diplomats, it's happening to the best of our best in the FBI, the CIA, and now congressional members in Congress.
It is essentially a declaration of war against the United States.
Well, I'm not allowed to talk about it. It discombobulated everything.
Is the government trying to mind control me?
There are a number of resources that wanted to step out, and they're not alive anymore.
And they began to basically beat him to death.
Unfortunate that I didn't die.
Nobody on this planet has any right to cattle tag human beings.
Hi, Steve here. What if a book written years ago outlined events that look eerily similar to what we're seeing right now? Economic instability, global tension, food shortages, disease, war. What if it doesn't stop there? Today we're diving into the mysterious claims surrounding the book 2025. What people say it predicted, what some believe is already unfolding, and how it connects to one of the most chilling passages in the Bible. The book, often referred to as 2025, is circulated online as a kind of predictive roadmap, describing a near future world marked by instability, control systems, and global crisis. Now let's be clear. There are multiple versions and interpretations floating around, and not all of them are verified or widely recognized. But what's captured attention is how closely some of its themes mirror current global events. Things like rising geopolitical conflict, economic strain and inflation, increased surveillance and digital systems, supply chain disruptions, growing division among nations and people. For many, it feels less like fiction and more like a warning. Supporters of these ideas point to recent years and say, look around. Conflicts escalating across multiple regions, global pandemics reshaping society, food prices rising sharply, nations shifting alliances. But here's the key question. Are these truly predicted events or patterns that history has repeated before? Because history does show cycles of crisis. And that brings us to something far older than the book of 2025. Long before modern predictions, the Bible described a sequence of events that many interpret as global upheaval. In book of Revelation, chapter 6, we see the opening of the 7 seals, and with each seal comes a rider, the 4 horsemen, the white horse, conquest or deception, red horse, war and bloodshed, the black horse, famine and economic collapse, and the pale horse, death, disease, and widespread destruction. Sound familiar? This is where the comparison becomes intense, because when people line up modern global events, claims from the book 2025 and Revelation chapter 6, they start seeing patterns. War, increasing global conflict, famine, food shortages and rising costs, pestilences, disease outbreaks, death, large-scale loss of life. Now, is this coincidence, interpretation, or something deeper? That depends on who you ask. According to both interpretations, the most severe events may still be ahead. The book 2025 suggests escalating crisis, systems tightening, instability growing, and humanity being pushed to its limits. And in Revelation, the seals don't stop at 4. They continue, leading to even more intense judgments and global consequences. Which raises a sobering thought. What if we're not at the end, but only at the beginning. Both narratives, modern and ancient, carry the same warning. Humanity will face extreme pressure. Systems may fail, societies may fracture, and survival may not be guaranteed for all. But here's something often overlooked. The book of Revelation is not just about destruction, it's also about endurance. It's about faith, and ultimately, restoration. Whether you believe the book 2025 is prophetic, speculative, or coincidence, one thing is undeniable. The world is changing rapidly, and for many, ancient scriptures like the book of Revelation are being revisited with new eyes, not out of fear, but out of a desire to understand what's coming next. So the question is, are these just patterns repeating themselves, or are we watching something unfold that was written a long time ago? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into prophecy, global events, and hidden connections, subscribe, because this is only the beginning. Think about it.
Now, this is the title of the book, 2025. Scenarios of U.S. and global society reshaped, there's that re again, by science and technology. You know what's so fascinating about this? It was published 27 years ago in the year 1997, and it was funded, well funded, by a Washington, D.C. think tank and 3-letter government agencies. But here's the thing, 1997, 27 years ago, and they write a book about a 502-page book about what the world's going to be. Fast mutating viral disease pandemics, genetically developed vaccines, smart IDs, 1997, and this is, you can do the word search and research yourself. They predicted not 2025, but by 2020, that people would be working from home virtually. Come on, listen, that's World War III, of course. Nuclear devices causing widespread contamination. Nanotech devices, this stuff was never even heard of. Digital currency. Vaccination programs run by organizations like the World Health Organization for a global killer that has yet to emerge. First printing, February 1997.
I want to now share with you some of the insights that these guys had way back in the mid-90s. Again, this is a well-connected think tank in D.C. They are funded and engaged with the wealthy corporations, the ruling class, the National Security Agency. And in 1997, they published this book, creatively titled 2025. And check this out. In the acknowledgments we read, our first thank you is to the sponsors, the people, and the organizations who made possible the original Project 2025 from which this book was created. What did they call it? It was called Project 2025? This book was published in 1997.
The project itself was led by futurist James Canton, an advisor in technology, national security, and economic forecasting. But what really raises eyebrows is the acknowledgments section in the book, because the authors openly thank the organizations that helped fund the original research behind it. Large corporations, technology companies, defense contractors, policy institutions. The kind of organizations that don't just observe trends, but often influence the direction of technology and policy. So the question becomes, were these simply educated guesses? Or were they looking at plans already being discussed behind closed doors? Either way, let's take a look at what they predicted.
10 things to expect if this Project 2025 from the mid-90s turns out to be correct about the remaining items that have not yet transpired. And before I list them, I want to remind us, these are not just, throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. I mean, it's like 90% track record here. And they may not be right about all these either, But here we go.
Now brace yourselves, because if what you're about to hear ever becomes reality, things could get very ugly. Let's hope they got this part wrong, but listen to this.
They said we will have World War III, a nuclear device causing widespread contamination, additional epidemics, cyber attacks, or in their world, computer-based socially significant crime, such as tampering with air traffic control or national security systems, a global currency, mass starvation. Now that, in and of itself, that's pretty heavy that we just considered, but given again the track record and how the things that they're announcing here, you also hear announced by the likes of Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab and Jesuit Tide. We're going to see some pretty interesting stuff as we go forward, but we're just on Project 2025 from the 90s right now. Let's look first at the mass starvation. I was mentioning Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, WEF. He stated, we're going to have an angrier world. In the context of food and energy scarcity, we are going to have an angrier world. Those are his words. And so when he talks about an angrier world, and in the same interview, Klaus says that this angrier world will be because of economic conditions, and that's why I see the need for a great reset. In fact, roll that clip right now, please.
We have to prepare for a more angry world, and I see the need for action. I see the need for a great reset.
When you start looking around today, some of these ideas don't feel as far away as they once did. Conversations about global crisis, food shortages, cyber warfare, they're no longer just theory. The World Economic Forum often discusses scenarios involving systemic shocks, digital infrastructure attacks, and the need for a reset of the global system. You hear similar language from government reports, economic forums, and international policy meetings. The idea that a large cyber attack could disrupt entire countries, or that supply chains could collapse and trigger food shortages, is something even officials now discuss publicly. And when you see these same themes appearing again and again, it makes you wonder, were these futurists simply connecting the dots ahead of time? Or were they closer to the people drawing the map in the first place?
There is a Obama-produced film, a movie, that came out called Leave the World Behind. Why did the Obamas get behind this film? The film, I won't be able to tell you that, but I can tell you what the film is about. It's about an apocalyptic scenario after the grid fails and there's a grid down crisis because of cyber attacks. And this comes out, again, right before 2025. And then you go back to 2014 with the release of a video game, which also has scripts like movies do. And this Black Ops 2, major prominent video game, the script writers for it were consulting with that the Wall Street Journal calls the premier futurist in the national security space. So the top Pentagon futurist was consulted for the script on this video game. And what is the script for the video game? Well, the object of the game is to prevent a cyber attack in the context of a new Cold War with China. And guess what year this video game is set? And again, this came out in 2014, and the video game is set in 2025. So we're starting to see kind of a pattern here, are we not?
But isn't it a little strange, that film produced by the Obamas? I mean, why that topic? And why now? And why do we keep hearing about these kinds of scenarios more and more often? Every now and then, authorities even suggest that people keep some emergency cash at home, enough for about 72 hours, just in case ATMs or payment systems suddenly stop working.
We look at World War III, and we look at their predictions that a nuclear device causing widespread contamination will take place. This might sound outlandish, but keep in mind that since 1945, with the invention and using of the first atomic bomb, there have been, in Cold War history, 16 near-miss nuclear events. And historians and national security experts estimate that about 1%, you have about a 1% chance in any given year of having a nuclear exchange. A 1% chance, then over a 100-year period of time, you'd expect it once. If you get halfway through that, you feel like, we're living on borrowed time. Well, we're like 80% of the way through a 100-year period of time since 1945. So it's hard to expect the unexpected. It's hard to foresee that which our normalcy bias doesn't allow us to see as potentials. We lose imagination because we see only the thing immediately in front of us. But this is something that the Project 2025 futurists are saying to expect. And again, we see war, epidemics, starvation. Let's do it in the proper order from the Bible again. War, starvation, epidemics. Those are 3 of the 6 that are up there from that pale horse.
God forbid something like that ever happens. I really hope they got this one wrong. But sometimes it almost feels like the scriptures are right on point. Now, here are the last 4 predictions we're supposed to expect. Listen to this.
Now, the last 4 predictions that they make here, we got 10 things to expect if they're correct. Universal monitoring of business transactions. Smart ID cards. Now, watch this. This gets even more interesting. Smart ID cards, including your religious and or organizational affiliations and perhaps with your genomic data. I had to take a picture of that segment out of the book, put it on the screen so you can read it for yourself. Identification cards will be universal. Smart cards will contain information such as nationality, medical history, perhaps even key data from one's genome, education and employment records, financial accounts, social security, credit status, and even religious and organizational affiliations.
Now that might sound a little far-fetched, but remember, this book was written almost 30 years ago, and many of its predictions have already happened. So before we dismiss the rest, listen to this.
The 9th one kind of sounds innocuous and not that big of a deal. It's just Social Security will be based on need only. The technical term for that is means testing for transfer payments or other forms of welfare. Means testing meaning only those who need it will get it, and they're making a prediction that will be the case with Social Security. Some people might be a little have their feathers ruffled by that notion, but I'm not meaning to get into the economic political debates about that. I want to bring this out because if they will means test it, then they will also be willing to take the next step, and that is ideological testing. Happened with the truckers in Canada. Bank accounts frozen. The targeted group, anybody who is the other, who is the demonized group of the day, can have now the precedent has been set in the West to be debanked, to have payment processors taken, to be prohibited from platforms that are kind of in that woke ideology at the moment. And so the fact that they're saying, well, you're not going to get your check unless you need it, that can step right next to the next stop on that journey toward tyranny. You're not going to get your food, you're not going to be provided for in a context of scarcity and famine.
Now, I don't even know which one is scarier, because honestly, all of them are terrifying. But it does seem to be getting clearer, doesn't it? They wrote about things like this almost 30 years ago, and today we keep seeing the same themes everywhere, in movies and video games. Some people call it predictive programming, the idea that certain scenarios are introduced in culture first so that when they eventually happen, we're not that surprised. Now, I'm not making any claims here, but you do start noticing similar conversations popping up everywhere. Technologists talking about the future, even people like Elon Musk discussing ideas like universal basic income. Some billionaires quietly building underground bunkers, and more of these signals appearing at the same time. So, what's really going on? What are they preparing for? What do they know that we don't? Anyway, let's keep going, because what comes next is very interesting.
This kind of leads right into another one while we're on number 9 about the Deagle Corporation. This was a major intelligence outfit that they were cited by and utilized by Stratfor, which is probably the biggest global intelligence corporation there is. And Stratfor cites Deagle. So they're a major player in intelligence developing and publishing. And they made a prediction that by 2025, there would be a reduction, look in the red, of population in America from 327 million to 100 million. And GDP would drop from 60,000 per person to 24,000 per person. Now, this is not to say that this will happen, but that's quite an alarming prediction to make. Why would you go out and say that? Well, it's in the context of here, what we were talking about, a mass starvation and global currency and major war and epidemics and cyber attacks. This is where you see massive population reductions and economic collapse. But I love their little disclaimer here. They first, this isn't the disclaimer, that'll be on the next slide, but first they say this: the collapse of the Western financial system will wipe out the standard of living of its population while ending Ponzi schemes such as the stock exchange and the pension funds. Take into account that the forecast that they've made here is nothing more than a model, whether flawed or correct. Okay, here's their disclaimer. It's not God's word. This is not God's word. This is not a magical device that allows us to see the future. Now, if you're planning the future and announcing what you're going to do ahead of time, then that's not a prediction. But these guys are just making predictions, and they're saying, you know what, this is flawed. This could not transpire as badly as we're seeing it, which makes me feel happy about that situation, about a population reduction of that magnitude and economic collapse. But whether it's going to happen or not isn't even so much the question as when.
So after hearing all this, it's easy to feel uneasy. A book written almost 30 years ago talking about pandemics, digital currencies, cyber attacks, global crises, and somehow many of those things showing up in our world today. Maybe it was just a group of futurists connecting the dots. Maybe some of these scenarios were exaggerated. Or maybe they simply understood the direction the world was already moving in. But there is something important to remember. Predictions are not destiny. History has always been shaped by the choices people make along the way. Every generation has faced moments that look dark, uncertain, even frightening. So maybe the real value of looking at things like this isn't fear. Maybe it's awareness. Because the more aware people are of the world around them, the harder it becomes for anyone to quietly decide the future on their behalf. In the end, the future isn't written in a book from 1997. It's written by the billions of people living through it right now. And that might be the most important thing to remember.